What if one unexpected kiss could unravel years of secrets, betrayals, and hidden truths? What if the moment everyone thought was just passion, was actually the beginning of a mystery that would change everything? Stay with this story until the very end because the final twist will leave you questioning everything you believed about love, loyalty, and fate. And before we begin, make sure you subscribe and join this growing storytelling community, because the stories coming next are even more powerful, emotional, and unforgettable. On a warm evening in the quiet coastal town of San Aurelio, where the ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine through narrow streets lined with old lanterns, Laura Mendoza stood on the balcony of her small apartment watching the sun slowly sink into the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, unaware that within the next few hours her life would collide with a past she thought she had buried forever, because across the street, stepping out of a dark sedan with a look of quiet determination in his eyes, was Jorge Castillo, the one man she had loved deeply and lost just as suddenly years ago, and the same man who had disappeared without explanation on the night that had shattered her heart. Laura had spent years convincing herself that she had moved on, building a life of routine and quiet independence, working at the town's small art gallery, greeting tourists, organizing exhibitions, and pretending that her heart had healed. But the truth was that certain memories refused to fade, especially the memory of Jorge's smile and the promise he once whispered to her beneath the old lighthouse that overlooked the sea, a promise that he would always come back for her no matter where life took him. Yet life had taken him far away, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions, and when Laura finally noticed him standing there beneath the street lamp, their eyes met across the distance like two storms colliding, both stunned and uncertain whether to move closer or walk away. Because sometimes the past returns not gently but like a tidal wave that forces every buried emotion back to the surface. Jorge slowly crossed the street, each step heavy with memories and regret, while Laura's heartbeat grew louder in her ears, and when he finally stopped a few feet away neither of them spoke at first, the silence filled with years of things left unsaid, until Jorge finally whispered her name with the same softness she remembered, Laura. And the sound of it broke something open inside her heart that she had carefully locked away for far too long, because despite the anger she once felt and the questions she still carried, the truth was painfully simple: she had never truly stopped loving him. The wind brushed through her hair as she stepped closer, her voice trembling slightly as she asked the question that had haunted her for years: why did you leave? But Jorge's expression carried a weight that suggested the answer would not be simple. And before he could respond, the sudden noise of laughter from a nearby cafe reminded them that the world around them had kept moving even while their lives had been frozen in that unresolved moment. Jorge looked down briefly as if searching for the right words, then lifted his gaze again and said quietly that the night he disappeared had never been a choice but a necessity, a decision forced upon him by circumstances he couldn't explain at the time because doing so would have placed Laura in danger. And although she wanted to believe him, the pain of abandonment had built walls around her heart that were not easily dismantled. Yet as the evening deepened and the first stars appeared above the sea, something in his voice carried a sincerity that made her doubt the version of the past she had repeated to herself for years, and before either of them realized it they had begun walking along the familiar path that led toward the lighthouse, the same path where their love story had once begun. The town around them glowed with warm lights from small cafes and music drifting from open windows, but to Laura it felt as though time had folded back on itself, bringing her to the place where everything had changed. And when they reached the lighthouse the wind grew stronger, whipping around the tall white tower that had watched over countless ships and silent confessions of the heart. And Jorge finally told her the truth he had carried alone for so long. That years earlier he had become entangled in a dangerous business deal involving powerful investors who were not the kind of people one could simply walk away from. And when he realized their activities were far darker than he had imagined, he had tried to expose them, only to discover that doing so placed everyone close to him at risk, including Laura, which was why he disappeared without warning, choosing her safety over his own happiness. Laura listened with disbelief and anger tangled together, because the explanation did not erase the years of loneliness she had endured, yet it also revealed a sacrifice she had never considered, and as the waves crashed against the rocks below she felt the complicated truth settling between them. Sometimes love is not destroyed by betrayal but by silence meant to protect. Jorge stepped closer, his voice quieter now as he admitted that he had returned to San Aurelio because the people who once threatened him had finally been exposed, leaving him free to face the one person whose forgiveness mattered more than anything else. And when Laura looked into his eyes, she saw not the confident young man she remembered, but someone who had carried regret for far too long. Someone who had come back not expecting redemption but hoping at least for honesty. The wind shifted again, and in that fragile moment, surrounded by memories and the restless ocean, Laura realized that all the anger she had clung to for years was slowly dissolving under the weight of the truth, because deep down she had always known there was more to the story than a simple disappearance. Jorge hesitated before reaching for her hand, as if unsure whether he still had the right, but when their fingers finally touched, the connection felt both familiar and electric.